Hey Bear, thanks for joining me today.
Nice to see you, Young. Excited to be here.
Most people know you as a investor, but more kiting person, and that's how I also spend a lot of time with you, as a friend and as a fellow kiter. We spend a lot of time, but obviously our main job is actually investment, right? As a venture capitalist, and you've been a spectacular investor for a long time. And so, for the sake of an audience who doesn't know you, can you give a little background about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I actually started as a semiconductor chip designer, and I came out to the Valley in 1984 when it was still mostly orchards. I lived literally at the back end of C.J. Olson Cherry Orchard in Sunnyvale, and I worked. My first job was with the CEO of a legendary company called Fairchild Semiconductor. He had left to start a company called LSI Logic, and I was one of his marketing guys. So I spent some time in the chip space, but went into venture capital in 1991. So a good 30 years ago.
Wow, it's been a long time. It's funny, chip was what made Silicon Valley, right? Silicon. And then we forget about silicon and S becomes software and then become internet. And then I think it become Uber economy. Now here we are. I think chip is coming back. But anyhow, I want to talk a little bit about your investment in startups. What are some of the companies get really excited about building your, number of the investment you have made? Obviously, you're a very successful investor. There are 22 companies that are listed that you invested.
I'd say, I guess the ones in the past, they're really fun, great companies in Silicon, a box, some network companies. But I'd say the ones that are on people's minds, of course, are going to be more consumer oriented and more recent. And I'd say in this around 2010, 2011, I was totally convinced that the world was going to move to cloud. It's obvious now and maybe obvious to a bunch of people then too. So I started to fund a bunch of things in the cloud space. So you can think of cloud video like Zoom here, where I was the first investor, or cloud design in Canva, which most recently was valued at 15 billion. There's like 5 million people a month that do designs on there. I started myself a cloud Hadoop company called Treasure Data that SoftBank bought, and then moved pretty heavily also into marketplace technology, which I also see as kind of a cloud expression in things in and around blockchain. And that includes, for example, Dapper Labs, which is the maker of NBA Top Shot, which has exploded on the market. If you haven't heard about it yet, you probably will. It's running about $5 billion GMV rate.
That's crazy. The whole non-fungible token stuff is just coming from nowhere and taking over.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting because it does seem like it came out of nowhere. It's been a 4 or 5 year journey, actually. So I mean, we'll probably cover that a little bit later, but like Zoom and Canva exploded onto the scene and seemed like instant hits, people didn't realize that it took 10 years or more.
Yeah, I'm really happy to say that we are co-investors in Zoom. And I think a lot of that is our kite surfing experience that we had together. And we also shared some business ideas and we also built a friendship that all worked out really well. Let me ask you a question around what have you learned from all these investments you have made? What are some of the tips that you can give to other future wannabe investors like Bill Tai?
Actually, so I have to attribute my philosophy. It didn't really just originate from me. I had the very, very fortunate experience of being mentored by Don Valentine. Don was the founder of Sequoia, and he was on the board of the first startup I was part of called LSI Logic. So when I entered the venture business, I basically tagged along with him. And we had both funded a company called Microchip Technologies that only the people in the semiconductor industry would know, but I think it's a 100 billion market cap company now. There was a time we were at a board meeting, our flight from Phoenix got canceled, and I got stuck in an airport having dinner with Don Valentine. And I was very young at the time, and I said, Don, what do I have to do to be good at this business? And if anyone knows the legend of Don Valentine, he's very terse. And Don said, it's very simple. You only have to get 3 things right. And I said, well, what are those, Don? And he said, the right market, the right team, and don't overpay. And he also went on to say, it's got to be all about the market. If you get a shitty market and a great team, the shitty market will win. So always focus on the market. Now, over time, I've kind of evolved that lesson to really a formula for risk reduction. If you think about the building of a company, those are the three things you have to eliminate as risks. So if you have a market that you know is a real market that's well timed, you have no market risk. If you have a team and you got to get the right executives and have the right mix of people, if you've got a team that's functioning well, that has good values, you don't have team risk, management risk. The last thing is financing risk. And financing risk comes from the other two. So if you've got a good market and a good team, you will always be able to raise money at some price. So that risk is off the table. And if you eliminate all three risks, by definition, you will have a company that has a lot of value at the end.
So let's talk a little bit about our nonprofit activity that you and I work together on, Extreme Tech Challenge. Last year, we had over 2,400 startups that applied for the UN 17 Sustainability Tech for Good event. And we had some great winners, 9 winners that took over 120 million venture capital funding since then. And it's been really good, a cause that we want to promote. So let's talk a little bit about the history and what you're excited about.
Well, first I have to thank you, Young, for providing the capital to help, co-found and start what became the Extreme Tech Challenge, because, it kind of was this little organic little contest that we were just having fun with our little kite community, but to turn it into something that really has legs took somebody like you that knows how to drive an organization and fund it. So thank you for that. And I guess the history really was sort of, as you talked about our friendship in the kite community, there's a very strange and interesting cross section of entrepreneurs who I think are drawn to interesting new things. And about 15 or 20 years ago, kiteboarding was a new thing. And it coincided with the creation of what we'd call Web 2.0. And companies like Facebook and Google and Twitter and those kinds of companies were really just kind of getting their sea legs then. And a lot of those young people were drawn to the sport. And somehow, because I started in that sport early, and I think I got you started into the sport of windsurfing about 5 years before.
Almost killed me.
Yeah, so we've been at it for a long time, but it became this flashpoint for community building because it was one of these things where you couldn't learn about it by reading. You had to ask other people how to do it. And no matter what you saw or what videos you viewed, you just couldn't learn it until you talked to other people. So as Sergey Brin and Larry Page started a kiteboard in the early 2000s, a lot of entrepreneurs suddenly flooded into the sport. And here I was, the old guy in the sport, and on my way to becoming a sponsored athlete for Cabrina and Nash. So everybody came to me, and that turned into this community that we call ACTI, athletes, conservationists, technologists, artists, innovators. And we would have these little gatherings where people would basically pitch what they were working on to their peers. And it expressed itself in a bunch of ways in little, meetups in Australia that turned into kind of, mobile app contests, to later expression where Young and I started this contest in South America, of all places, in Brazil, that went continent wide. And then that turned into something that partnered CES, world's largest technology trade show, with Richard Branson as a guest judge. And then in its final evolution, which is now, into this wonderful contest aligned with the UN sustainability goals, where companies can combine what they're doing for profit with the side output of doing something good for this world.
It's been a great experience and working with you. I mean, you have such a vision and the direction that you want to do. And I think having the right people around our community, that makes it not even a job, right? It's just a fun thing to do. It becomes almost like our social life, and meeting the exciting entrepreneurs, as well as people who appreciate the environment and nature, and then being able to exercise on the top of that. And on the top of that, it turned out to be a good investment.
It's turned out to be great. I think out of our community, the people that would come to some of these kite trips, ranging from Elon Musk to Drew Houston to Sky Dayton to the, probably some of the top first 20 employees of Google. It just created this ecosystem that gave new entrepreneurs with new ideas access to people and capital and coaching and mentoring that allowed them to really kind of light it up.
So we were lucky because we were at the right time when the Web 2.0 with the cloud and mobility is happening. We got to take advantage of that time. But let's assume you're a new entrepreneur and you want to be doing impact type of startups. What advice do you have for those people in terms of what do they should do and how should they reach out and what community they should belong to?
Well, so I'd say first and foremost, it's going to be very, very difficult to build any company that does not have positive impact on this world going forward. If you think about the generational change afoot and how consumers view things, young people today make their purchase decisions based on what a company stands for. And if a company stands for good, it's a big positive. If a company does something destructive to this world, it takes a lot of heat and it becomes less viable. You can see it in the market value expression of companies that do stand for good. Look at a company like Beyond Meat or Tesla, which are seen as, eco-friendly. They carry market values that are extraordinary compared to their peers. So the cost of raising capital, or the cost of capital as you raise it, it's lower. You get people's interest. You do something that's bad for the planet, nobody wants to touch you. So keep doing what you're doing, do something good for this planet, but build a business that is both sustainable and about sustainability. So build a good business, but make it good for this planet.
So in the past, we said impact investment is not a good business because the ROI. But obviously, things are changing. And the degree of how we can impact, how changes can be made, can be realized a successful outcome. And that success will bring more success, right? That's the idea behind the Extreme Tech Challenge. We want to portray, we want to communicate, we want to share the success story so that more people can do it, and we want to encourage more startups to do it because we think startups is where creative ideas come, they take the risk, and then through the partnership of corporations, we want to accelerate that highway so that they can become scalable. And now there is a page of UN here, UN sustainability that we are supporting to Ban Ki-moon. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon supported this whole idea of the UN 17 sustainability goals. Now we are working with them. So Bill, you want to talk a little bit about the importance of the UN and how we can play in this particular mission?
Yeah, so the United Nations, obviously one of the world's most incredible august bodies, multinational efforts to do things that are good for this planet in a way that any individual country couldn't. And so the United Nations, which obviously was formed after World War II as a member body of all nations to have a forum where they could collaborate and prevent wars, that has now grown into a very large organization that does a lot of things, supporting everything from UNICEF to broadband for every school in the world. And a few years ago, under Ban Ki-moon, they released a new framework, which was the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are 17 categories of things or movements like life on land, life underwater, smart infrastructure, things that if they were done by the peoples of this planet, the world would be a better place and it would be sustainable and not burn itself out, kind of flooding the atmosphere with carbon. So along those lines, we took our contest and organized our categories to align with those goals. Now, 17 is a lot of categories, so we compressed them to, I think, 5-ish or so. And we have
I think 9 actually.
9 now, okay, because there's some special ones like female founder and some other things.
Yeah. Like Woman Award and others.
Yeah, so we've got these great categories now where really any viable business now, because again, if you're doing something that is harmful for the planet, it's going to be hard to exist in a few years. But if you're doing something good for the planet, you're going to have a special advantage, and you're very likely going to fit in one of these 5 buckets where you can apply. And should you make it down to the finals or even not, we've got community around each of those categories so that there are ways for you to interact with other people, companies, resources that like those areas. We have corporate sponsors that are interested in a given vertical and want to know the companies there because they know also it's their future to work with companies there. So I think it's a great framework that allows easy access for corporate resources, venture resources, other startups to build collaborative communities to try to further the causes.
In fact, we expect over 3,000 companies will apply for the 2021 XTC final, which I'm really excited about. And the over 30 regions are participating, including Africa, which I think is a very successful way of expanding our programs. I look forward to seeing really great companies that could come out of this event. Let's go into a little bit of other topics regarding new technologies. Where do you think the excitement is going forward? Clearly, you tend to bet 5 to 10 years ahead of other people.
I think technology rolls in a series of waves. We had the silicon wave, we had the equipment wave, we had the network wave, interface wave, and we're still in the wave of data science, but moving more from the science of data science to the application of data science. And as I think about the way corporations and big businesses are going to change over time, you can look at an example that is a little bit in the past, but relevant for what's coming, and look at, say, like the retail industry. And you have obviously older names like Sears, JCPenney, Kmart that were kings of their business for many decades. And in a matter really of one decade, Amazon and Walmart basically wiped them out. And why is that? It's because if you think about what is a Walmart or what is an Amazon, they are basically data science clouds with products attached to the endpoints. If you think about what's happening in transportation, Uber is basically a data science cloud with cars on the end of it. Airbnb is a data science cloud with rooms on the end of it. What does that mean? That means that the working capital requirement is 1/10 or less in the new model than the old. It means that there's almost no loss in inventory because, like a Walmart or an Amazon, Walmart knows when things are moving, in Los Angeles and not in Boston, and they can move it. So the cloud of working capital is very light. So I think as we move forward, we're right now at the point where Uber and Airbnb, to me, look like CompuServe, Prodigy, or AOL in the face of the internet, meaning they're private cloud architectures, purpose built for something, they work really well. But if you were to start them today, you would basically use blockchain and you would use a data science cloud and you would build on top of an open framework that costs 1/100th the amount and fire 300 engineers. So not that they should do that because it's too early for that. And AOL lasted for a really long time when the internet started. But I think as we go forward, you're going to see data science remake from the inside out every business. And there's going to be a complete changeover of all of the old industrial companies. They're basically going to fade away unless they move forward. So I think we're at a wonderful time to basically remake maybe 400 of the Fortune 500.
Thanks, Bill. Really appreciate it. Obviously, we invest in great companies like Zoom that have changed the way we communicate, but that's just an example of many cloud-enabling companies. Now with the data, like you said, it's changing even the fundamental business model of how the business is done. Your investment in Dapper Labs with the NFTs is a very interesting area of change that I don't think that many people understand. So maybe you can talk about what is the non-fungible tokens and how do they work and where are they going?
Yeah, so it is interesting that, it appears that NFTs just kind of snuck up on people and exploded. Dapper's been working on that category for 5 years. And I think one way to look at it, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, all those, kinds of ICOs and things, those are actually a subset of NFTs, meaning that if you think about an individual Bitcoin on the end of a cloud where you know its location and who owns it and when it moves, that's no different than what I described before with Uber knowing where the car is. And so anything is swappable at that endpoint of the cloud as long as there's a transport layer that is self-aware. So you can think of blockchain and NFTs kind of like TCP/IP for assets. Some of those assets will be unique and individual. Some of them will be limited editions. In the case of Bitcoin, there's 21 million of them. Like, a piece of art, you might have 100 pieces of limited edition art. They're kind of the same, but they're within that spectrum. They're the same, but they're different from everything else. So think of an NFT as a uniquely identified asset that is self-aware on a blockchain, so that the friction of identifying it, seeking it out, finding it on a marketplace, and transferring ownership is zero friction or very low friction. And history has shown anytime you create a marketplace with low friction, the market expands because you have more buyers and sellers for it.
Especially in digital space where people thought everything is copyable. Now, when you're a digital artist, it really is a problem. But by having ability to give tokens that can be able to trace where you are and who belongs and where it came from, which is the first music, second song, so whatever, is really a powerful tool, isn't it?
It unlocks a lot of things. I'm going to use another example that exploded on the scene in the 90s, that it's an expression of something that looks like an NFT engine, which was eBay, right? So there's an economist that wrote Mystery of Capital that I did a lot of work with to try to automate some of his principles. He actually sold a rug on the Latin America equivalent of eBay called Mercado Libre. And I said to him, this is the way you think about NFTs. When that rug was sitting in your garage, no one knew it existed. And it had low value to you and zero value to everyone else. As soon as you took a JPEG picture of it, listed it, wrote a little bit about it, put a price on it, and stuck it on, quote, eBay, actually Mercado Libre, suddenly it was exposed to a marketplace. Because that marketplace had communities of interest where you could describe categories of things, suddenly it had an audience. So its value went from zero to something. So think of the NFT wave as a gigantic eBaying of the world, but in an automated way that's super low friction, where the ability to attract community is lower friction than even in eBay days and more rabid in the case of things like NBA Top Shot. So it's communities of interest and alignment of economic interests around items.
Well, this is one of a big experiments that I think we are watching, whether it's going to be something that a whole new way of doing things, or maybe there's some bubbles going too. So we'll see what that is over
There's a
time.
little of both.
Yeah, true. But that is what the new technology is about. It's not a sure bet. That's why people like you are here, right? So tell us about, how do you decide as an investor what kind of technologies that you want to bet? What is your approach and methodology?
So it's a little bit like surfing. Okay, so, Young, you and I spend a lot of time on the water, and I'm going to describe two things. One is sort of timing, and the other is riding. Okay, so if you think about the timing of a wave, everybody that's on this call has probably tried to surf once or twice in their life. And you'll remember from that experience that there's only three places you can be: in front of the wave, behind the wave, or on the wave. If you're in front of the wave and you paddle too much, you just get tired. And there's a phrase that says, being early is a lot like being wrong, right? So you don't want to like blow a lot of energy with too much burn rate too early. And then if you're behind the wave, it's too late, right? There's no way to swim up the back of a wave. So what it's really about is picking that moment where you feel the wave coming and you paddle once. And if you do it exactly right, all you have to do is paddle once and you're standing up and the wave carries you. So I look for a lot for timing of markets where I can get that little thing going and have a rider on the surfboard. Sometimes I'm the rider on the surfboard too, like in Treasure Data, but more often than not, I'm picking the rider and arming them with a little surfboard. Okay, so I described venture capital in the 90s compared to now. In the 90s, everything was capital intensive. So to do a silicon project, you might have to come up with $50 to $100 million and wait 5 years at $1 million burn rate. And so everybody would syndicate. So it was like going to the beach where every surf shop owner shared, and you would pick the rider and hand them the board. Okay, that changed. So after the internet, what happened was, now you look out on the ocean and there's 1,000 kids on a lot of churn. And you're trying to pick out the one kid that's kind of paddling a little bit, and you got to get out there on a jet ski and hand them a board because it's moving. and your timing matters too. So I think it's really about the timing and selection of the wave and picking the rider out of an ocean of thousands and thousands. Because it used to be that you'd fund the guy that did his 4th generation router at Cisco and knew what he was doing. Now it could be anybody. So the geographic picture is a lot more diverse. The age picture is a lot more diverse. And you got to sync on like, what is the wave that's going to hit everybody and carry with a rising tide everyone, and pick out that one or two that you just know can carry it forward and arm them with more than money. And I think this is the key part about XTC. There is so much money around right now that, as I said, there's no financing risk at the moment if you've got something with a little traction and a good team. So the real key is, what can you bring to the table that is more than money? Can you help somebody get into the vortex of information around the market that they need to be in so that they can tune? And so if I can find a person that is coachable, understands, driven, and help them insert themselves into the market where they get feedback and iterate fast, that's always a winning formula. Eric Yuan was exactly like that. Melanie Perkins was exactly like that. The treasure data team, we forced them in that position. It was like that. Yeah. So that's what works.
Absolutely right. I mean, having worked with Eric together with you, I mean, the guy is just incredible CEO from the beginning. He knew what he wants to do. He just needs some push. And we were just helping him at the right moment. And we were riding the wave, next wave, pretty well. So Bill, if you are picking, let's say 3 or 4 new ideas in the vast of ocean, what are some of the next wave that you would look at?
You know, I'd say we're still continuing. Well, I'd say, okay, there's a couple continuation waves that still have a lot of juice, and then some new ones. And I'd say the continuing, I think what Zoom has really broken open is more than just video meetings. So I'm going to put it in a little bit of an abstract sense to think about, what is an NFT? Okay, so what has happened now is we have become our own unit economic pieces of productivity. We are our own NFTs that can come and go and join other economic circles at will. Where if you compare it to 20 years ago, you were locked in an office tied to one company that owned you. It's not like that anymore. No kid that I know works in one company anymore. They all work 4 jobs. So there's been a great digital virtualization of all items and now people's energy. So there's a transformation occurring in the way people work, the structure of companies and how they work. For certain industries, it doesn't apply to semiconductor manufacturing, but for many kinds of creative businesses, you have a complete change in the way people work. So I think there's a lot of runway still on applications that are built on top of things like the Zoom platform. I think, secondly, I talked a bit about blockchain. The network and marketplace effects of a data science cloud with knowledge-aware endpoints, that's also transformational. So I think the restructuring of a lot of businesses and industries like healthcare, I think you're going to see great efficiencies introduced. And then I think also the whole world of value exchange, whether it's, you know, kind of cryptocurrencies or, I mean, you see the explosion in fintech. It's a larger, I think it's kind of as large as the internet wave was from an investment thesis. You know, think about how many different facets of finance you've seen digitized and come public recently, whether, you know, starting with PayPal and now whether it's Affirm or Stripe or, you know, there's going to be 200 variations that come public at billion plus valuations in this segment as it transforms.
Yeah, you see some of the big IPOs coming up, Coinbase and others are coming out as well as a platform. So it's very exciting. As you know, you've been probably looking at this for over 10 years. And now eventually it pays off. But it's hard to tell at that moment. I just remember you and I both were involved in Bitfury, which is one of the big mining companies. At the time, I think it was $200 per Bitcoin. And here we are, we're talking about the numbers you cannot imagine. So, but being able to see that 10 years ahead is not an easy scale. But I think I attribute to you with the characteristic of being an optimist, someone that actually be able to see what is coming without worrying about the risk, and also probably believe that things are going to work out. So your operational savviness of looking at what's in front of you, and then being able to push those entrepreneurs that you believe in. Not easy, but it's that optimism, I think, is what makes this next wave possible. And thank you very much for your joining me today, Bill. I think this has been great. I look forward to continuing to catch our next waves, whether it's in the ocean or in tech field.
There are so many to come, so look forward to that as well.
Great. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.